Gary Thompson is a taxi driver in Edinburgh, one of many in the city. He's been driving for years, and up until last year, he worked for a private company and paid his taxes and national insurances every month. And then a year ago, Gary realised his lifetime ambition, and he set up and started working for himself, and he invested his savings and went about into the unknown. And it was working up until the virus struck, and demand for taxis pretty much disappeared overnight. But when Gary went to try and apply for support, he was told he hadn't been self-employed for long enough and he was excluded, even though he had been paying his taxes all the time, continuously over the qualifying period. That is unfair. Sarah Lackad is a tour guide in Edinburgh, one of thousands of workers in the hospitality sector in that industry. She has been running her own business for more than 3 years, but up until the beginning of 2019, she didn't make enough from it to be able to pay the rent, so she had some other bar jobs in the hospitality sector. When she went to try and apply for support, she was told that because most of her earnings had not come from self-employment over the past 3 years, she too would be excluded from the self-employed income support scheme. And of course, because by then she was actually doing okay as a self-employed worker, she had given up the other payroll jobs, and that meant she was excluded from the coronavirus job retention scheme support as well. So she falls between the two stools, and that is unfair. Georgina Allison is an architect in Edinburgh. She has been self-employed for a while, but 3 years ago, she took time off to bring up a newborn child, to look after a newborn child. And that meant that her earnings were very little in that year, and that brought down the average of the 3 years in which the calculation was made to a much less than it would have been otherwise. Now, I have asked HMRC to disregard maternity periods and childcare in making this calculation, but they have refused to do so. And this is not just unfair, this is a blatant discrimination against female self-employed workers in this country. Now, all of these things need to be fixed, and they are possible. It's possible to fix them. And for 6 long months, dozens of MPs, perhaps hundreds of MPs, on behalf of tens of thousands of constituents, have been arguing with HMRC and the Treasury to try and get something done on behalf of the people they represent. And I think we've all been stunned at the degree of intransigence that we have met. We are constantly invited to applaud the schemes that have been set up, and there is talk about how many people they have helped and how much money has been spent upon them. I acknowledge that. I'll sign anything you want to say how great that is. But that's not an excuse or a rationale for refusing to fix problems which are manifestly there in the system. In fact, the very scale of the schemes, the very amount that has been spent upon them, it is bewildering that for a very small proportion more, they wouldn't go about and actually plug all the gaps that are clearly there at the moment. And this means, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that when we come to remember these schemes, I fear that actually they will be remembered not for their largesse and generosity. They will be remembered for the parsimony and the unfairness that has led to many millions of people being treated unfairly in this country. And it's not good enough for the Treasury to refuse to answer questions, to refuse to take meetings, to sit there and pretend that it doesn't understand what is happening. There is no reason for it. So I appeal to the Minister in the front bench and her colleagues to please open your minds, open your ears, and come and meet with us so that we can discuss the things that need to happen to put these schemes right.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.